You're back in the smoke-filled room, and we're so happy to have you. I've got our political team with us, Abby, Chris, Matt, Michael. Thank you guys for being here. We are recording this on Wednesday instead of our usual recording time of Thursday because I am finally getting a chance to go on vacation. We were just commenting about how extra white I am at this point, so going somewhere where I might be able to get a tiny bit of Irish tan, which basically just means sunburn, not suntan, because I don't really tan. But hopefully I come back with a little Irish suntan, little burn on there. So we're recording this on Wednesday, and I still think we're going to cover all the topics for the week, but with our luck, I'm sure something big is going to break on Thursday, and then we're going to be like, well, what are you going to do? Next week, while I'm gone, the week leading into Christmas, we've got an awesome episode, so you don't want to miss that one. I interviewed Illinois Republican Party Chairman Don Tracy and State Representative Joe Sosnowski to talk about what to look forward to in 2024. Why should Republicans be optimistic? What are some of maybe the challenges we're going to face? It's an awesome episode. You don't want to miss it. And then we're going to be back in person for our final episode of the year. We're going to have some fun. We're going to get a bottle of whiskey or something, sit down at the office, maybe smoke some stogies, and just have a more relaxed episode. If you watched last week's episode and you saw just how unfiltered Matt DeRay can get when we're more formal, I can only imagine how that episode's going to go when we all sit down and purposely relax and chill and just chat about some things. So you definitely don't want to miss the last two episodes of the year. For this episode, we, of course, as always, have a jam-packed agenda. We got to start here. So if you watch politics at all in the state of Illinois, you know that Monday was the deadline for filing petition challenges. And we talked last week about the number of candidates who had filed. We realized since then that there still are presidential delegates to be filed. So that number will go up. So we'll give you an updated number once we have the final filings, plus some special elections. So that number will increase. But at the moment, we're talking about the number decreasing because some of these candidates are going to be knocked off the ballot. So there are great sources out there. Illinois has reported extensively on petition challenges, so has Capitol Facts, so have a few outlets in the media. So if you want to know all the petition challenges, there are news outlets or blogs available to you for that. Here, you come here for analysis. So we're just going to talk about the places where there are the most serious challenges that are worth discussing from a strategic standpoint. So let's get into them one by one or group by group. First one I want to go into is down in your region, Butler, and it's going to be one of the hottest races in the whole state. Republicans are going after LaToya Greenwood's petitions, saying there's a pattern of fraud. There's obviously a history here with that being in a region where fraud is, unfortunately, sometimes kind of common. Tell us what's going on there.
So if you look at Democrat petitions, not just LaToya's, but others from our region, they've been increasingly reliant on East St. Louis, Cahokia Heights, Centerville for their petition signatures because there's just so few Democrats in the remaining parts of the county, like O'Fallon and Freeburg, et cetera. And that region has always kind of been like fraud. So the House Republicans ran LaToya's signatures through like a program that kind of points out like, hey, this signature looks like it was signed by somebody other than the actual person, looking for those like letters that are similar and those kind of things. So they challenged based on that. They have a couple of circulators that they're challenging. And apparently, according to the press release, LaToya Greenwood as well, some of the ones on the sheets that she circulated look like they may have been forged. So I think, there's some credence here. We'll see what the State Board of Elections decides in the coming days, but this would be a big deal if she gets kicked off because this is one of their highest profile races on the Dem side, and it would be very embarrassing if they have to do a write-in campaign or slate LaToya again later this summer.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make. So people need to realize if she does get knocked off the ballot, most likely the Democrats will just slate her. However, slating happens after the primary. So there's now a gap between now and then when it will be harder for her to campaign. It'll be harder for her to raise money. She won't be on the ballot in the primary, so it doesn't give her that extra little boost in name recognition. There are problems for the Democrats electorally if she gets knocked off. And then really a big thing here, We can talk about the actual challenge and the merits of the challenge. We can do that in a second. But in terms of the strategy here, this is a great move by House Republicans and the Schmidt campaign. Even if they don't get LaToya knocked off, you get a chance to put her name next to the word corruption and fraud in the news. It's gotten extensive media coverage. If that's all it gets, and you waste her time and you waste the Democrats' resources, you come out ahead. So we can talk about in a second the merits of the challenge itself, but ultimately as a strategy, got to give props and kudos to Esposito, the House Republican team. I've got to imagine John Fogerty, their lawyer, is running point on this. They certainly deserve props. This is a great strategic move.
100%. And it's also a reminder of know your circulators, make sure that they're trustworthy individuals.
Yeah, listen, I wish we could convince Ryan to come on one of these days, because the stories he and I could tell about just people struggling with petitions and making dumb mistakes like this. We'll talk about some of those in a little bit. It's just all too common. We warn people over and over and over, take this seriously, trust in somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. We were just talking about it this week. I think we had like 7 or 8 different candidates this year who screwed up their petitions and had to either redo it or had to call us to salvage it. We had a few people who screwed up their packets and we were helping them fix it the night before. It's just, I don't understand. It's maybe the way our society is going now, where people are just lazy and have less attention to detail, but it really isn't that complicated. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but really in the grand scheme of things, this ain't hard.
Right. All you have to do is ask for help and pay attention. Like, I think people in this business don't want to look stupid. And so they just go on in this whole situation and say, I'm fine. I don't need to, consult with anyone. Then they end up getting kicked off the ballot or making dumb decisions that they could have just avoided. They said, hey, you know what? This is not really my area of expertise. Could you, someone who could help me? Or, hey, I don't have that many signatures. Do you know anyone who could help circulate for me? Like, these are all logical solutions to a problem, and instead people just get embarrassed, and then they find themselves in a situation that's ultimately more embarrassing.
Well, we talk about it. Anytime a new team member comes on board, we talk about how, listen, be stupid, sound stupid, feel stupid. That's how you grow. It's important. I can look through my history of, 18 plus years of doing politics now in the state. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't look stupid over and over and over. I spent years going to people saying, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. Could you please help me? I still even do that. I did that last week on something where I called somebody up and said, hey, listen, I'm dealing with X. I've never done this before. I don't know anything. I'm going to shut up. Could you just teach me what you know? Like, this is the only way to grow and the only way to know what you're dealing with in politics. Yet you're right. Too many people just don't want to look stupid, and then they end up looking even more stupid.
And this goes along with the point I brought up during petition season at the end. We were hearing so many incumbents were having problems getting it. If you're an incumbent member of the legislature and you can't figure out how, or even in Greenwood's case, a former incumbent member of the legislature, then if you have a problem getting petition signatures, you're automatically doing something wrong at that point. Because if you've been in office for so many years and you can't get enough people to go out there and get you a sheet of 10, 15, 20 signatures, then you don't deserve to make the ballot, because you haven't been paying attention and you haven't been doing what you have to do once you get in office.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, when you're looking at, it's not a lot of signatures. It's not that difficult. And I don't know, we've seen this a lot. Again, if Ryan was here, he'd tell you about the number of companies out there that you can go to get signatures from. And a lot of them are shady as heck. I mean, you're not getting good quality signatures, but you just need sheets. So you go get sheets. And I know there's some of those in the Metro East area. So we've dealt with some of them. So I'm sure that's what this is, to be honest. And I'm sure there was some roundtabling here. Is it going to be enough to knock her off the ballot? Let's talk about the challenge itself. Honestly, just with the sheets that were posted that were supposedly super egregious, I don't see it. They look more egregious than they are. But if you understand how petitions work, you just look at the left column with the signatures, or if they screw up and they put the printed name in that one, you look at the next column where they put it in the printed name instead. And the signatures look different enough. And so I don't know that you're going to be able to prove a pattern of fraud. Instead, you're going to have to do a signature by signature check and do what's called a binder check. And now if those signatures don't actually match what's on record for the voters, now you got a case. But that's done one by one, and she filed with triple the number of signatures that she needs. So I just, in terms of actually getting her knocked off the ballot, from what little I've seen, it doesn't seem super likely, but that doesn't matter. That's not the goal here. The goal here is the bad publicity for Greenwood and the Democrats, and they've already accomplished that. And it's going to pop up because this case is going to take a bit. It's going to take a month plus to resolve this. So they're going to have a chance, multiple bites at this apple. So as I said, it's a good play and a good win for House Republicans.
And it's going to burn some of her time. And like you said, it's going to make her fundraising a little more difficult over the course of the next, month or maybe more, depending on, how this goes and how long it gets drug out. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Michael, I know there's a handful of other challenges on the Republican side down by you. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, there's three main ones kind of that people are talking about. So Blaine Wilhauer, he's being primary by Matt Hall, as we had talked about previously. His petitions got challenged. Not really sure of the specifics there of what that challenge is. But that is like pretty groundbreaking, because if that challenge ends up being successful, then Matt Hall will be the nominee. It's going to be nearly impossible to, do a write-in campaign and get more signatures than, when you're running against somebody else that's on the ballot. That's a really tough go. Adam Niemerg was challenged. The former
that one was bad.
Yeah, the former Vermilion County Democrat chair was the objector there. So kind of interesting, considering he has no opposition, primary or general election.
Yeah, and that when I mentioned that one was bad, Niemerg just didn't notarize his statement of candidacy. Like, just a total amateur move. And just pause there for a second, Michael. We talked about this in previous weeks. I think a couple weeks ago, I talked about how I take heat for defending some of the more conservative members of our party who were part of that Freedom Caucus, because their philosophy, their issues deserve to be part of our party. But then they make me look bad constantly because they are politically, and I keep saying this word, and I'm sorry, I'll get in trouble for it, but politically, they're very dumb. How do you not notarize your statement of candidacy? Like, that is the most basic. I don't understand how you forget or neglect to notarize a statement of candidacy. It's at the top of your packet. It's the thing you see while standing in line waiting to file. And if you look at it, the whole bottom section, maybe Lane can bring up a screenshot. The whole bottom section just is empty. So it's clear if you're looking at it that half the sheet is empty. Maybe I did something wrong. Like, I don't understand it at all. Anyways, Michael, what was the third
it wasn't even like he didn't sign it and it wasn't notarized. So it's not like it was like, it's just a mess.
You'd like to say amateur mistake, but it's like it's a level below amateur, and it just drives me crazy.
And then also Angela Evans, who's primarying Dave Severin, her petitions were challenged. I'm not sure of the specifics there either on what that objection is. But one thing that I would say is kind of like, this isn't just political. It's just like your entire life. It's okay to be aggressive and be assertive and kind of make enemies. That's part of politics. But if you're going to take that approach, you also have to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, because obviously there's going to be people, Democrats and Republicans, that are going to be looking for opportunities to kind of, knock you off your horse. So,
yeah, totally. All right, let me go through. There's a bunch of challenges that frankly don't strategically matter to what we've talked about in terms of the top races for Republicans, for conservatives. There's really just 5 districts that are worth talking about here. So let me bring them up quickly and then open it up to you guys for thoughts. In the 19th Senate District, 2 of the 3 Republicans have been challenged. Kurzawa and Gaska, both of their petitions were challenged. Solomon's were not. We don't know how those are going to go yet. We'll know over the course of the next month, but that could change how that race looks. In the 34th Senate District, we've talked about how Juan Reyes is facing some felony charges, and Republicans wanted somebody else in that race. More than likely, they will have their wish because Reyes did not file enough petition signatures. So I don't know how they survive that. So it looks like Crystal Soltow will be the nominee in that race against Steve Sodelman. In the 53rd State Senate District, we've talked about this race a bit. There are 4. It was 6. Then it's dropped down to 4 Republican candidates running. Now, one of those has been challenged, Mike Kirkton. The other 3 have made the ballot. They haven't been challenged. So if Kirkton is knocked off, that will whittle that race down even further. We'll keep an eye on it. And then 2 House districts. The 76th House district, the only reason why we're talking about this, none of the Republicans were challenged, but Amy Briel on the Democrat side was challenged, and she's the most moderate of those candidates. So if she gets knocked off, that is a great sign for Republicans in 76. So we're certainly going to watch that. And finally, House District 95. We haven't talked about this district at all, and there's good reason for that. It's a very Republican district. It's a safe Republican district. That said, Mike Coffey is appointed, so Republicans can't just take it and assume they're going to hold on to it. And they're not. They're taking care of what they need to do there. All of Coffey's opponents, both in the primary and the general, have been challenged. So that may address what ends up happening there. And actually, as of this morning, Wednesday morning, the Republican candidate who's running against Coffey has dropped out after being challenged. So it already is clearing the field a bit. So we won't likely talk much about 95 because it isn't really at risk for the Democrats to take as long as Coffey does what he needs to do. And he is. So 95 should be safe. All right. Anything you guys want to talk about when it comes to petition challenges, having heard all that?
The one thing that I would say that's just kind of statistical is I just kind of did like quick math. We talked about the small number of candidates that have filed, but 13% of the candidates that filed were challenged. So that could really change, like you said, kind of the makeup of these races, and it may, end primaries early or make general elections a heck of a lot easier for Republicans. So it's just something to keep an eye on. We'll see how it plays out. And obviously we'll update people kind of as these objections are finalized, but could really change some dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the 19th Senate District race, I found it interesting that the only Republican who didn't get challenged was Max Solomon's, because I looked at Max Solomon's petitions, and that was the weirdest petition packet I have ever seen. I don't want to go into specifics here of what Max did or how he managed to do this, but it was the weirdest petition packet I've ever seen. So this is one of two things. Either Solomon challenged Gaskin and Kurzawa, or Hastings challenged him. He didn't challenge Solomon's because he wants to face Solomon for some reason. That's what I'm wagering.
Yeah. I'd be curious if you end up finding out which of those ends up being the case. But it was interesting to me that the two of the three that did get challenged, and then, Solomon's being funky. All right, we got a lot of topics to get to, so let's move on to the next one. I know Chris certainly wants to talk about this. He, in our internal Discord, posted a celebratory GIF on this one. If you guys have been watching the news at all, we've talked about this a few times on SFR, but there was a law passed in Springfield that was since challenged that I have to generalize here and summarize because we could get in the weeds here and talk about this for like 20 minutes. But basically, it was a law that went after crisis pregnancy centers. The far left was claiming that these pregnancy centers were lying to women and using underhanded tactics. And they had one or two examples that I don't know if were true or not, but they did have one or two examples that were not great examples that never should have happened. And they used that to use the strong arm of government to completely clamp down on these crisis pregnancy centers. And in the process, really what they ended up doing was they claim it was protections for women, but really one of them, the leader of Personal PAC, said the quiet part out loud at one point and said, really, the goal was simply to shut down these crisis pregnancy centers. That was really their end goal. Ultimately, it was taken to the courts. Attorney General Kwame Raoul has backed down, knowing that court case was not going his direction. A judge called it very stupid and said likely unconstitutional. That kind of made it pretty clear where this thing was headed. So Raoul has backed down. They come to an agreement. They're not going to enforce this law. Chris, why don't we start with you, since I know this was something you were excited about. There's definitely some politics to talk about here. What's your thoughts?
In what can only be described as a massive blow to Pat Brady and the rest of Planned Parenthood and Personal PAC and everybody pushing abortion legislation in this state, Kwame Raoul has capitulated to the pro-lifers in a rare victory for the pro-life movement, not only in the state of Illinois, but nationwide. This may be the first pro-life victory nationwide since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is a big thing to say. In any case, Kwame Raoul, I think, knew where this lawsuit was going. They had already put the law on hold because the judge said this was egregious, this was stupid, probably unconstitutional. I think he knew where this was going. So in order to avoid the precedent in the law that it would set by a ruling from a appellate court to maybe even the United States Supreme Court, he basically capitulated and says, I'm not going to enforce this law as it's written in Springfield. I'm going to just enforce, because I think I can enforce the law just using the law as it's presently written with the Consumer Protection and Deceptive Practices Act, which begs the question why they even needed to pass this law at all, which a lot of people are asking right now. But Kwame said, I'm not going to enforce the law. The pro-lifers are happy. The funny thing is here, I don't think Kwame told anybody he was doing this.
Yeah.
Because the reaction from Pritzker and Pat Brady's best friends seemed like they had no idea what was going on, and they were very, very upset. One of the stupid Democrats from DuPage County, she was the chief sponsor of this bill. She was like deeply, deeply hurt by the fact that he capitulated to the pro-lifers and everything. Her name is escaping me at the moment.
Sarah Costa Howard.
Sarah Costa. I knew it was one of those 3-name ones. But
They're all 3-name ones, Chris, by the way. They're all 3 names. They all 3 names.
These modern women are too much for Chris.
In any case,
Don't say moderate.
I said modern.
I think he said moderate. I was like,
in any case, this is a victory for the pro-life movement. It makes Kwame Raoul look like an idiot. It looks like all of the House Democrats look like idiots because a lot of the moderates in the Democratic caucus had their arms twisted that they needed a unified front on this. And if you do not vote for this, you are going to get primaried. And now they all look like a bunch of idiots because this law doesn't even work anyway. So,
well, and let me talk about some of the problems with this. So by the way, I mentioned earlier, it was the head of Personal PAC that said the quiet part out loud. I remembered after that, it was actually the head of Planned Parenthood. Either way, it was one of the leaders of the pro-choice movement in Illinois. There were some serious problems in this bill. Like, even if you agree, because I think we could all agree that deceptive practices should not be allowed to be used. Like, we could all agree that even for our own case, we don't agree that you should be lying to anybody. If you say that they're X number of weeks pregnant, they should actually be X number of weeks pregnant. You shouldn't lie to them and say you're something that you're not. So we all agree with that, but that's not what this bill did. There were some serious problems with this bill, and it wasn't as it was described in public. The actual bill exempted abortion facilities in their speech. Let them say whatever they want while regulating only pro-life organizations in their speech. That doesn't work. That is a clear violation of the First Amendment. Another thing that it did was here's the other thing here. So hold on, I'm just reading through everything here. I'm trying to do this on the fly, but I'm missing a couple of things here in my notes, and we're live, so I'm just going to keep going. But ultimately, this was targeting specifically these pregnancy centers and going after them at using government to strong arm them, to weaponize government, to shut these things down. And this is what I don't understand. We have a group of people in the pro-choice movement who are all about trust women, and women are really smart, and we should let women make these decisions. This law essentially said that we don't trust women to know the difference between a Planned Parenthood facility and a crisis pregnancy center. That we don't trust them to know the difference. That if you go to a crisis pregnancy center, they don't offer abortions. They're going to offer you everything else, and they're going to give you every other piece of information, and they're going to support you, and they're going to give you care, but they don't do abortions. If you go to a Planned Parenthood, they offer abortions, and they're going to kind of suggest abortions because that's basically what they specialize in. Like, this fact that you don't believe women are smart enough to know that difference, I think that's a damning thing on all of its own. Do we really not trust women that they can't figure out the difference between those two things?
And the other
for me, it's a huge misstep from a messaging standpoint. I think when you say pro-choice, it says, okay, if you become pregnant, you have the choice to either have an abortion or have the baby, and here are the places that can help you, have the services that can help you. But this bill makes it very clear it's not about having choices. It's about abortion. They're pushing a pro-abortion agenda versus a pro-choice agenda. And to me, like, that pro-choice phrase is something that independent voters really love. And so why are you going to go away with that if that's a message that's already been winning for you? It just seems like an unforced error on a lot of fronts.
Well, you know what, Oliver, I really like that. I mean, I haven't framed it in that way, but I'm going to do that in the future. This does reduce the choice. If this law had gone through and these crisis pregnancy centers were shut down, you are reducing the choice for women. Absolutely. Because now your only choice is to go to an abortion provider. And listen, a hammer sees every problem as a nail. You go to an abortion provider, they're going to tell you to have an abortion. Right. So, I mean, at the end of the day, this does reduce choice. It's definitely more pro-abortion than it is pro-choice. And I do think that's an interesting and important distinction because it does seem like the Democratic Party has moved from that more mainstream, as you said, independent voters, even more moderate Republicans, more moderate Democrats agree with that concept of pro-choice, not necessarily pro-abortion. And yet the Democratic Party is moving so far left, not just in this state, but nationally, that you look at the DNC last cycle where the word abortion is brought up and they cheer for the word abortion, not for women, not for choice, but literally you're cheering the act of abortion. And for me, I tend to be, I admit, I get crap for it. I'm a Cook County Republican. So for some states and for some people, maybe in downstate, I'm more of a Democrat than a Republican, they like to claim, just because I happen to be more mainstream. But this idea that, I think women should be respected and healthcare decisions should be healthcare decisions, but you don't cheer.
Right.
It's something you regret having to do. You don't cheer that. We cheer women, and we cheer the strength they have to. I mean, my wife's doing it right now. The strength she has to carry our child is an incredible thing that I didn't even realize till I had to watch her be in pain every day, and I love her so much for it. Like, that's what we cheer, but that's not where the Democratic Party is today, especially not in this state.
No,
I'll take
well,
it
I
a
think
step
it's
further. Abby,
Go
you
ahead,
were
Derek.
saying that you think it was a advertising or a messaging misstep or an oversight to frame it this way. I will even attribute malicious intent to them. I don't think they care. I think that when push comes to shove in election time, they're going to say the same lies that Republicans are extremists against choice. They're going to spin whatever they need to. I think they are intentionally saying, we don't even care. It doesn't matter what people are saying about the message now, because when election time comes, we're just going to run the same old playbook. So
No, but I think that's a good point, DeRay. Like, that it gives us an opportunity to shift our messaging. We talk all the time as Republicans, we don't know how to talk about this issue, but they're providing us a lane to say, what, Democrats are actually extreme. They're pro-abortion. It's not pro-choice. And all they want to do is kill babies. Like, this seems like a great opportunity for Republicans to rebrand their messaging around this issue.
And I would
Chris
just
is having a
say,
field day.
Real quick, let me read from the judge, because this is from the judge. This isn't from either side in the case. The judge says, in reality, SB 1909 reduces the ability of pregnant women to receive information necessary to make an autonomous and informed decision. Instead of that autonomous decision, SB 1909 or 1909 would cabin a pregnant woman's decision-making process by allowing only the limited data approved by the state, instead of allowing her to hear both sides' advocacy and information before making an abortion decision. I mean, even the judge backed up what we just said, which is this is about allowing women to make informed decisions about their own choices here with their healthcare decisions. And that's not what the state wants. That's not what Democrats want. They want to make the decision for her. It's interesting. One last thing here, and then we'll close with any final thoughts from you guys. One last thing here is, of course, Pritzker found some way to go after Republicans when he was asked, because one of you said, was this an overreach? And was this, what was this? What was the point of this even? Pritzker said, those who are in the losing end of a vote in the legislature often decide that their recourse is to take this thing to court because they can't win in the battleground of the legislature. It's like, yeah, okay, you know what, Pritzker? You guys drew the map so that only you guys could be in the legislature. Of course, we're going to go to another ground that might actually be slightly more fair and favorable. Somehow Pritzker spinning the fact that he broke his promise on fair maps, which led to this situation that we now have to go to the courts because we can't even get a voice in Springfield. Pritzker created the problem by being a giant hypocrite and then found, of course, some way to blame somebody else, because that's Pritzker's theme song, is that it ain't his fault.
well, like the judicial branch is a foundational part of our government, and if they have something that they disagree with, they're going to sue and take it there too. Like it's part of it. That's where the checks and balances. And I think we saw that on this issue. I would say odds are we're going to see that on some of the Second Amendment and the gun bans and things like that the legislature has passed. Like you've got a super majority, but you still have to be smart about what you're passing, because what's the point if it's just going to get overturned? Like, they just got way over their skis on this.
Colin, I think you should go head to head with Pritzker. It's like two kids playing with one of those little tops that spin, and Pritzker has his spin on the leftist way, and then you pass it back to him, you spin it the other way, just back and forth. I'd love to see that.
I mean this comment with respect. I respect Pritzker's Jewish heritage. He would need to use a dreidel, and I don't know what an Irish version of a top would be. Would I just use a potato?
A bottle cap.
Yeah.
A bottle cap. There you go. So I'll spin the bottle. Pritzker will spin the dreidel. Respecting both of our heritages, and we could maybe have some fun with it. I like it, man. All right. Let's stay on the Pritzker topic, because I like railing on the guy since nobody else does. So this week, it was reported this week, it actually happened a couple months ago. The NAACP president for Illinois was caught on camera calling asylum seekers or migrants savages. Let me look in this quote because that wasn't the only thing that she said. They don't speak the language, and they look at us like we're crazy because we were the only people brought here against our wills and are slaves sold into slavery. Let's see. You need some clothes. You need a place to stay. We're going to make it happen. I feel your pain. I'm not trying to be an N-word, but I'm pro-black. There's just some ridiculous things in these statements. And then to top it off, she's supposedly in Dubai, I guess, on vacation, but WLS got a hold of her and she claimed it was a fake and said it was AI. I mean, the dumbest excuse possible. So anyways, a lot of people are calling on her to resign, rightfully so, because these are pretty horrible statements and racist statements that she's saying. Pritzker called them reprehensible, but we're talking about the leader of the NAACP. So female, black, there is no way in heck that JB Pritzker is ever going to say that she needs to step down. And of course she didn't. So Pritzker, the paragon of good government and ethics, will call on you to step down if you do something wrong, if you're a Republican. But if you're a Democrat, especially minority or female, no way Pritzker's not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because there are political ramifications for doing that. And for JB Pritzker, politics always trumps doing the right thing.
Well, I mean, we can talk about the political angle here, Colin, if you want to. I mean, I think the real political angle here is that the migrant crisis is getting so bad that we're already seeing these divisions, and that we keep seeing these divisions within the Democratic Party's base, and it's ample time for more moderate and conservative voices. I'm not going to say the Republican Party because nobody cares about the Republican Party in Chicago, but I'm going to say more moderate and conservative voices to come forward with alternative solutions to the migrant crisis, because there's so much anger and frustration going on with the state and the city's response to it.
So
yeah, I think the issue here, though, is politically, Chris. Why would they? I mean, the left is going to tear themselves apart here. There's a reason why you don't hear Republicans talking much about the migrant crisis, because when I think there's some sort of adage in Sun Tzu's Art of War that I'm not remembering right now, but in essence, the philosophy or the strategy is when your opponent's tearing themselves apart, don't get in the way. Just let them do it. So strategically, I don't know why Republicans or moderates or conservatives would touch this with a 10-foot pole.
And then we'll go back to the good government side again. It doesn't solve the problem.
Doesn't solve the problem, but listen, we're not the governor. If JB Pritzker wanted to make us solve the problem, then he could have gotten out of the way and let a Republican win as governor, but he is governor. So we get to play politics. We're not in the office. He's in the office. He has to do the right thing. Of course, that's just not JB Pritzker's MO.
Well, think about it. Like, this is a way to take the attention off of Brandon Johnson and JB Pritzker. All of a sudden, there's a new scapegoat in this whole migrant crisis. Let's be honest, Pritzker and Johnson are not handling this well at all. So now there's a whole new focus to this situation, which is someone said something really horrible about it. So I think selfishly, it takes the heat off of Pritzker. I mean, why I would have her there,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how she survives this. I think at some point she's definitely going to have to step down. But this isn't the only controversial thing she has said, supposedly. And this is the thing. Once the sharks are out, they're going to find everything. Supposedly at a lot of previous of their meetings, she has said some other pretty crazy things. So we're probably going to hear a heck of a lot more about these things that she's said if she doesn't step down. So Democrats are going to find some way to make sure that she's replaced.
Shades of Mitt Romney 2012. Always,
yeah.
Everyone's always listening.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know that rule, and this was with their meeting that was done over Zoom, I believe. So it was like anybody could be recording. I don't know. People are just. It's 2023. There are cameras everywhere, yet people are still dumb.
So actually, what I heard happen is they were trying to cover up for what I said about people down south. Yeah. So they need to say something even more out there to get the heat off my back. So I'm not complaining.
And I missed, this is what I was looking for. I knew she said something crazy on top of everything else that I read, and I just found it. She also said that they're going door to door and they're raping people. Like, it wasn't just calling them savages. Like, she went. This wasn't DeRay over the line. This was over so far with this Friends quote. You're so far over the line's a dot to you, that she looked back and she realized it was just a faint dot in the distance, and that was the line.
I feel like her and Trump could get along well. They rile each other up in what they say.
Possible. I mean, it does seem like the type of person that Trump tends to get along with pretty well. He could have another season of Celebrity Apprentice and have her on. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to stay on Pritzker for a little bit. for a couple topics here, just because we're kind of on hypocrisy, as we often are, as a subject on this podcast. And I don't know how many of you know this for our watchers, because it was completely buried by the Chicago media. But J.B. Pritzker's cousin was accused of sexual misconduct, and by itself, that isn't necessarily newsworthy. But some important things to know. Number one. His cousin was about to host a Biden fundraiser in LA and then got yanked off the host committee. Number two, his cousin is pretty involved. Matthew Pritzker is pretty involved in Chicago, donating to some aldermanic campaigns, owning and selling real estate in the city. There are enough Chicago ties here that it isn't just, hey, some distant relative happened to do something crazy. This is a close relative of J.B. Pritzker who is involved with J.B. on Joe Biden's campaign, who works in Chicago, does things in Chicago. Like, there are enough Illinois ties that we should be hearing about this. And at minimum, Pritzker should be asked a question. I know family, if you're a Democrat, family's off limits. If you're a Republican, they can go after family. So I'm not saying they should be attacking JB for it, but, writing a story and or at least asking his office for comment. But if you look, the story's been written up in the LA Times, the Washington Examiner, the Daily Mail, Newsweek, but zero Chicago media have picked it up and have run it. Again, I'm not saying this should be front page news. It's Pritzker's cousin. This isn't Pritzker or his wife or something. All right, so I get that. But the fact that it's just completely buried is further proof that the media in this state is just so in the bag for J.B. Pritzker. It's sickening. I don't understand how it wasn't even just brought up. And there isn't just even a short story, just a blurb. There are ties to Chicago here. How the heck it didn't actually get covered, I don't understand.
The first thing that comes to mind when I hear the story is, again, I'm not always the biggest fan of Trump, but look how viciously they went after his kids. And it still continues to go on. National media, local media, et cetera. These stories continue to go on and on and on. But when it comes to a Democrat, like I'm Hunter Biden comes to mind, but or Pritzker's family, the media's like, oh, I don't know, we can't really talk about it. And it just, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the Pritzker's he's accused of engaging in sexual acts with the plaintiff without her consent and while she was incapacitated. I mean, this isn't, again, courts have to do their thing here, but this isn't like, hey, so-and-so made a dumb comment at a holiday party. I mean,
Right.
Whether this is proven true or not remains to be seen, but it is serious enough that if this was a Republican, it would absolutely be covered in the news. If it was Rauner as governor and one of Rauner's cousins in another state who even had no political ties was accused of this, it would have been in the news and Rauner would have been asked about it. This is somebody who has ties to politics, to Pritzker, to Biden, and the city of Chicago. It is newsworthy, if not, not page 1, but maybe page 10, but it just nothing. I don't know. Drives me crazy. I'm beating a dead horse, so let's move on. Another thing. This is dumb. This is small. I know, but we're on the topic of Pritzker hypocrisy, so we just got to talk about it. We are recording this on Wednesday, and today, Wednesday, J.B. Pritzker is doing an event with the Anti-Cruelty Society to encourage people to adopt shelter animals. And I was reminded of the fact that Pritzker gets his pets from, I believe, breeders. Now, that part we can fact check. All I know is he didn't get them from shelters. He has doodles and multiple of them, and has multiple of them. You don't just get lucky and the shelter down the street has doodles for you over the years. You go to a breeder. So what we have here is yet another situation of rules for you, but not for me. Pritzker wants everybody else out there, and all those plebes who can't afford to break the rules or aren't in government, all the rest of us are required to get our pets and our dogs from shelters. But J.B. Pritzker, people like him, they get to go to a breeder. Just like, no school choice for all you families who maybe could benefit from it but can't afford it, but school choice for Pritzker and Stacey Davis Gates and all the people who can afford it, who are leaders who can break the rules. This is just another one of those examples. Of course, I encourage people to get their pets from shelters. Dustin is my boy. I love him. And we got him from a shelter. So I absolutely encourage and support that. But you don't see me going to a pet store or a breeder and then going out publicly and doing a press conference saying everybody should go to shelters, but I didn't. The second thing is why the press wouldn't just ask him. Pritzker likes doing social media where they do photos of their dogs and they're cute dogs. Why the media wouldn't just be like, hey, did you go to a shelter? Just ask the question. But of course, no media would ask that question. They're just going to give him this super positive press pop, a good spread. Look, Pritzker loves dogs and animals. No question as to, hey, where did you get your pets? You're encouraging other people to go to shelters. Did you get your pets from a shelter? That's a basic question you would ask if you think for yourself and you actually have a tiny bit of journalistic integrity, but I guarantee Pritzker won't get that question.
I have cats, so
Of course you would have cats.
yeah, they're better.
I mean, you're basically
Okay.
crazy cat lady already.
Oh, all right. Let's calm down there. You know, this is
I
a
mean-
conversation we had in the office a while ago about how all the people who are involved in field and politics have cats and hate dogs because every time you knock on a door, the dog runs to the door, goes crazy, and like knocks stuff over, bites the owner. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's why people
I
who
mean-
knock on doors for a living don't like dogs.
I would have my dog bite you if you came to my door. So
I wouldn't
I
go to
think-
your house.
I think Oliver's position is shared by a lot of people in DuPage County.
I don't care
True.
what they say.
Yeah, listen, I like dogs because they love you unconditionally. And yeah, they're a bit dumb, but they always love you. Cats, they're too smart. They're always scheming.
They don't need us.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like dogs are too dumb to scheme, which is why you love them because they just love you unconditionally. And yes, when they kiss you, they
don't
probably
have
just got.
emotions.
They
They're
probably just
dogs.
got. What do you mean they don't have emotion?
They're dogs. They
Dogs
don't,
are
they don't-
all
they don't
emotion. Are you kidding me?
They don't have feelings. They're just dogs.
What?
Says the person who
Don't
owns
try
a
and
cat. Cats are
personify the
soulless.
dog. It's just a dog.
What are you talking
Cats
about?
do.
Have you ever been around it? Every dog has a personality. What are you talking about?
Don't ascribe human feelings to dogs. It's not how animals.
Says the cat owner. Says the cat
Right.
This
owner.
may be our
Cats
most
are soulless.
controversial episode yet.
Sheesh. I mean,
I'm a
I
big
thought
dog guy.
there were reasons to
Dogs
hate
for
Chris
sure.
before, but now knowing how anti-dog he is, like this is. I think we should call PETA and the Humane Society, maybe even Pritzker, if there's time to get to his press conference, see what Pritzker's thoughts are on this.
Real.
So, anyways, my point of the whole thing was just pointing out yet again how Pritzker is coddled by the media and how he's a giant hypocrite. Because they just signed this law 2 years ago. We got all this credit for shutting down puppy mills, which isn't actually what it did. Ultimately, actually, it will empower puppy mills and it will help puppy mills. But whatever, it sounded good, so let's do it. And yet again, here's the hypocrisy of something that looks good and sounds good, but they're not going to willingly follow their own rules. Pritzker's going to tell you got to go to a shelter while he still goes and gets his pet from wherever the hell he wants to go to get his pet from. Nobody cares about this hypocrisy, just me.
I said I have
Just add it
cats.
to the list. Another example.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Rules for me, not for thee.
All right, you guys are
the other way
disappointing me
around.
this. You guys are disappointing me this week. All right, let's
These
talk
are
about
juicy topics, Colin. We want the juice, the meat. Give
All
me
right,
the
well, I'll give you-
juice and the meat.
I'll give you some juice. We didn't have a chance to talk about this last week. Let's talk about it now. The migrant tent, or the soft-sided shelter. The migrant tent is dead. This ain't happening. Brandon Johnson's failures have reached astronomical proportions. And I'm sure Chris is going to just talk about it for a second. My real question is, how much does this hurt Pritzker? Because Pritzker got himself involved. And at this point, Johnson is such a giant failure that the splatter can't not hit Pritzker and everyone else along the way. But we can get into that. I'm sure Chris wants to give his thoughts first. So go ahead, Chris. Talk about how you and your dumb cats have an opinion on this.
Good news for Pritzker. The company who was supposed to supply these soft-sided shelters ain't going to charge
Okay.
the state for them anymore. They're just going to pick up the tab for doing nothing, which is, don't know how
Basically
Pritzker
what
got
they
that
are.
deal across, but good. It just happened. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Johnson has to have had the worst first. I don't even know if we're 6-7 months into his mayoralship right now. These are the worst 6-7 months first months of a term I've ever seen. There was somebody posted. It was somebody from the Chicago GOP or something. So Lori Lightfoot at a bar went up to her and said, I miss you so much. And she said, you have no idea how many people have said that to me. Because like we discussed on the very first smoke-filled room, people will miss Lori and people are missing Lori. In any case, yes. At some point, these problems in Chicago are going to be falling back on Pritzker, especially now that he's taking a more active role within this migrant crisis. We talked about for months how he was kind of on the sidelines. It was kind of just letting Johnson fail. And eventually he thought he could step in and save it. That's where the soft-sided shelter idea came from. State side. It was a state
Right.
push.
Yeah, I mean, he thought he could just come in, ride in on his white horse as the savior, and it was a total failure. And for those who don't know, this tent that they were talking about putting up ended up being on a site that had serious environmental concerns. The city hid him from the state. The state ended up shutting everything down. It just became a giant cluster. And at this point, Pritzker, this was their They say the city chose the location, which isn't inaccurate, but it was Pritzker's concept to do the soft-sided shelter. Now they're not even doing it anymore. They're moving to brick and mortar sites. But let me look, we're recording this on December 13th. It's freezing out. We've had multiple frosts, multiple snows, and we still don't have a solution here of an actual solution. This idea they had, they scrapped it, a week and a half ago? And now just the last couple of days, now we're moving over to brick and mortar sites. It's like we're in the middle of December and they're still figuring out what to do. The winter's going to be over by the time they figure this crap out.
And they get to go to the third chief progressive in the state of Illinois, the Cardinal of the Archdiocese of Chicago, for him to save their asses on this one. Because Lord knows the Archdiocese is a bunch of vacant buildings doing nothing because a million different reasons that I won't go into on a political podcast. But now the Archdiocese is coming in, they're gonna house all these migrants. And really, this is what I've been pondering. This is them doing what they start. This is the concept they started with, to throw these migrants into these vacant brick and mortar shelters that somebody owns and just have them be there because it made the most sense back in the summer. But they had so much pushback from the community, they couldn't find an applicable place that would be able to do this. Now they're kind of doing a smart political maneuver and biting the bullet here. You have to piss somebody off here. Somebody's not going to like the solution to the migrant crisis. But really, them putting the onus on the Archdiocese and saying they're the ones doing this, it takes a little bit off of their shoulders, and it finally gets these migrants into actual shelters.
Chris,
so, what?
I have a question. Where are these brick and mortar? What neighborhoods are these going to be in?
Knowing the Archdioceses are going to be everywhere.
Well, so here's my thought is that, originally they were looking at doing these in black neighborhoods. So it seems like it wasn't, progressive blacks or the black population helped get Brandon Johnson elected. So why would you want to piss off that entire demographic? Like, that's your base.
You have to.
I think racial politics absolutely took a play here, because ultimately it was, when you looked at where they were looking at putting these shelters, it wasn't in those affluent white areas. It was in more lower income areas. There were some Hispanic neighborhoods. It wasn't all just black neighborhoods that we're looking at, but there definitely racial politics came into play here. And Chris, I think your point is something I totally agree with, which is they tried to avoid having to have any pain. Like, no pain at all. Let's just solve this without making anybody unhappy. And we've been saying this, and you're right, that they had to just eat their vegetables. You're going to have to tick people off a little bit. Take your medicine and move on. But by trying to avoid creating a little bit of a problem, they just end up creating a gigantic problem. Instead of just leading and saying, listen, we're just going to have to take our medicine here. Everyone's going to have to give a little bit. We're all going to have to work together a little bit. And yeah, this stinks, but let's make it happen together and let's just all suck it up. They tried to come up with the perfect solution, which is kind of the Brandon Johnson that I've gotten to know here as he's been in office. Is there's always this sort of pie in the sky, wishy dreamy, unicorns, perfect solution, but those don't exist in real life. And so they've spent the last however many months chasing this unicorn and looking for the puppies and rainbow and sunshine that never existed. And now finally, we're actually going to take our medicine. But my question is it way too dang late?
So there is a wonderful quote that I've been wanting to use lately. Somebody interviewed, I don't remember what publication it was, somebody interviewed Jeanette Taylor, who's the Democratic Socialist Alderwoman of the 20th Ward. And I'll be honest with myself, I actually kind of like Jeanette Taylor because she's brutally honest. She's a great public speaker. And they were interviewing her, and she said, she said something along the lines of, there is no reason why we should have won. Like, we have no idea what we're doing. The progressives should not be in power right now. Brandon Johnson should not be mayor because we have no idea what we're doing. Like, she said that straight up.
I had that quote. I was going to go to that next. So well done, Chris, because I was going to that next. She said, we should not be on the 5th floor. We weren't ready. We don't know how government really works. We're pretending like now we got into power. Let's show you how it's supposed to be done. And we look real stupid right now. Those are her words.
It's not real socialism. That's what everyone says.
She's always been brutally honest. And she's brutally honest here. I mean, that's exactly right with a lot of progressives when you get them elected in office. They have these ideas of what they want to see government. And then you occupy the 5th floor of the city of Chicago and you realize, oh crap, I have no idea how to actually run this city with so many interests, and I can't keep them all in line.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, they have this is one example of the many failures. I want to stick on the Pritzker angle of this. Let's shift slightly. The Pritzker administration drafted a letter that was supposed to be sent to Texas, discouraging migrants from coming to Chicago. Now, their example or their excuse is this was the Biden administration's idea, not ours. Of course, they're always going to blame somebody because it ain't my fault, is J.B. Pritzker's theme song. So who knows why they actually did this, but it was done. It was Pritzker's administration that drafted this letter to discourage migrants from coming to Illinois. And there's nothing overly egregious in the letter itself. It's clearly part of a strategy to try to reduce the influx of these migrants coming to Chicago, and possibly could be good government, maybe not, depends on your perspective. But I could absolutely see in something like this hurt Pritzker in the future. You talk about how we're a welcoming state, and no one on the right's going to hit him on this, but somebody could come after him. A Gavin Newsom could come after him on his left on something like this in a national election or some sort of public space in the coming years, where you could say, hey, listen, we welcome the migrants. Meanwhile, your administration drafted a letter telling them not to come to Chicago. I'm not saying that's how it works in politics. You take a snippet, and J.B. Pritzker's administration just gave his national opponents that snippet. I think this is going to come back to bite him at some point.
I just feel like it's basically like an SNL skit. It's like you're in high school, you invite everybody in your class, like, come over to my house, we're having a party, it's going to be great. And then hundreds of people show up, and then you're like, oh crap, what do I do? Like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, they ragged on Texas, they ragged on Florida, they ragged on all these southern states about how, oh, you're racist and you don't want people coming to this country because you don't like, this or that or the other. You're xenophobes. And then, thousands of migrants show up and they're like, where can we send them? Just get them out of here. We don't want them. It's like their chickens have come home to roost. I get it that we're, 1,000+ miles from the border, but people are going to show up, especially when you're out there saying, hey, we're proud to be a sanctuary city. We're proud to be a sanctuary state. Who wants Medicare? Who wants Medicaid? Come on in. Like, what did you expect? It's just stupid.
I mean, we can only speculate, but it'd be interesting if this happened literally 6 months prior, back when the whole Johnson versus Vallis mayoral election was in play. It'd be interesting to see if that would have affected the outcome at all.
Maybe Vallis' people would have gotten paid then.
So, I mean, sticking to the point of this topic, the letter itself, I mean, is this the kind of thing you guys think? It's small potatoes, but I do think it'd be brought up in like a presidential debate at some point in the future by a Newsom or somebody on Pritzker's left.
Well, so I think we always talk about
itself.
Yeah.
Well, we talk about it all the time, is using small things like this to prove a larger point. And to me, this is like Pritzker's a hypocrite. Just to start attacking this onto the list of things. I think you have to take note of things and use it for the future.
All right. Let's see. We are starting to run out of time, so I want to skip just a couple things here. Let's get into. We only have one real campaign topic, but it's a juicy one. Plus, Michael, I think, would have murdered me in my sleep if I didn't let him talk about this. So, a couple of major endorsements in the IL-12 race for Bost and Bailey. Michael, what do you got?
So we got two, one for both sides. So Speaker Mike Johnson publicly endorsed Congressman Bost earlier this week. So that, shows that NRCC and those folks are going to have Mike's back through this primary. And then on the flip side, Congresswoman Mary Miller endorsed Darren Bailey, which is kind of it's kind of a big deal considering, incumbent congressman endorses somebody that's running against another incumbent congressman. We kind of figured this was coming. I know that there were some concerns earlier this year that Mary Miller may have a primary opponent. And I think that is what delayed it to today or this week, that they, didn't want to stir the pot unnecessarily. And she kind of just held off until this time. Some people seem to think it's a little bit of payback because Congressman Bost endorsed Rodney Davis whenever there was that Rodney Davis, Mary Miller primary. So it's kind of like her opportunity to kind of get back at him a little bit. But I would say it's probably all the above.
Yeah, I don't think either of these endorsements are overly surprising. Everyone assumed Miller would endorse at some point here. The Speaker Johnson one is a little bit interesting just because new speaker, weighting himself in a tough primary fight like this. And if you're the Bost campaign, it's not Speaker Mike Johnson, it's Trump's handpicked speaker endorses Bost, right? I mean, Trump supported Johnson taking over as speaker, and that's what you lead with. When Kevin McCarthy endorsed, it was Speaker of the House, but he's establishment. But you can't say that about Johnson. Johnson was a consensus pick and had Trump's blessing. So I think if you use the right terminology here, it's not Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. It's Trump's choice for Speaker of the House Mike Johnson endorses Congressman Bost.
I would also say one of the things that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch. A couple of weeks back, Jim Jordan, who is a member of the Freedom Caucus along with Mary, publicly he endorsed Mike. There's a chance that he even comes to the district and does an event. So, you've got this division within the Freedom Caucus in D.C. over, okay, who's the right man for the job here in IL 12. So I would say there's probably not going to be, it's unlikely that there's going to be resources from that Freedom Caucus pouring into the district in favor of Darren. Mary's not been a very strong fundraiser herself. So it's not like she can write a check to him. So it's kind of like, all right. And a lot of the people that, are big on Mary were already going to be big on Bailey. It doesn't really add, new supporters, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I mean, it does just seem like everyone's sort of digging their heels in, right? Bost supporters are digging their heels in to be stronger for Bost. Bailey's are digging his heels in to be stronger for Bailey. And that's just good news for Bost. I mean, Chris, I know, Matt, you play chess too. And Oliver, I think you dabble a bit. You like to be
I have to watch Connor play chess, which is enough for me.
Good.
I only play against Chris. And I beat him.
I mean, listen, there's a strategy here where when you're ahead in pieces, you're happy to trade down. If you're up a couple pawns or a bishop or a rook or a knight, you're happy to trade down because the advantage of being up a pawn when everyone still has almost all their pieces isn't much. But being up a pawn in the end game where that one pawn can become a queen, you're going to win the game if you've got the right king position. So the point here is, if you're in the lead, you're happy to trade down. And that's what I think is happening. I think both sides are solidifying their support, and Bost started in the lead. So Bailey has to do something to actually change people's minds, not just solidify the support that he has. And so far, nothing that I've seen is something that's going to be strong enough to change the opinions of somebody who was leading Bost. And that's what he's going to need to do to win. Now, he has several months left. So if he's got something big, he's not going to roll it out this early. It's going to come out in January or February. So there is time for this to change. But at the moment, if I'm the Bost team, I'm pretty happy with where things are, because if both sides just want to dig their heels in, then awesome. We were in the lead. We'll stay in the lead.
On paper, it seems like that Bost was maybe sitting on this endorsement or waiting for the right time, because it seemed like clockwork, like right when Mary Miller dropped hers, and 2 days later, he's like, all right, I'm releasing the Johnson one. So he's probably waiting for Mary Miller to do something like that so he can pounce, or at least have him in the back pocket and say, why release Johnson's endorsement if I could wait till Bailey makes the first move?
One thing that I would say is, why would you roll this endorsement out on Illinois Review? I tried clicking on the link on my computer, and my antivirus pops up. Get off this site. Your computer will probably stop working tomorrow. It was just boop. So don't go to IllinoisReview.com, please, for the sake of your laptop.
Yeah, it's the place to give your laptop STDs for sure.
Well, she also did it on Facebook.
But Michael, I think you know the answer to that question, because if you're trying to get to Trump, the road in Illinois to Trump is through Vargas and Casper and Illinois Review, and suck up to them and make them happy. So you know the answer to your question before you asked it. Though it was fun to get a little ding on Illinois Review. And
is that even true, Colin? Will talk about Vargas and Caspar and all these Trump guys. I don't even think Vargas or Caspar have ever even met Trump.
No, that's not true. So they can get you in the room. Are they close enough with Trump to actually get you the endorsement? No, but can they get you in the room? Listen, I can't get you in the room, so I will give them credit. They are at least the most likely to get you close to Trump of Illinois people, of Illinois influencers. So we got to at least give them that credit.
This is just speculation, but I feel like those getting in the room is just paying enough price to go to an exclusive fundraiser that President Trump wants you at for the low price of $10,000. we all see those websites and we click on it. We're like, hey, that'd be kind of fun, but there's no way I'm spending 10 grand just to meet Trump. I think that's what it is, but I don't know.
Money talks. All right, let's go to another topic here, political topic. So a study was released in the last week or so about women in politics and their political power. And Illinois was one of the states that they looked at. And there were some interesting stats in here of women and their representation in the state legislature. The Democratic caucus has gone up from 36% female in 2010 to more than 50% in 2021. Meanwhile, in that same period, the representative amount that Republicans made up, or that women made up of Republican representatives, dropped from 23 to 29. So overall, more women in politics, but less or fewer of those are on the Republican side. I think there's a number of reasons for this, and I want to talk it through with you guys. Of course, we got to start with Oliver on this. Why can't we get more women in Republican politics? What's the reason for this, especially elected politics? Is this or is this not a problem? What can we do about it? Give me your thoughts on this, and let's open it up to a discussion.
So as a female in politics, you definitely feel that mentality that, you're sort of in that secondary position. And I view this issue very much how I view young people getting involved in the Republican Party, is that we talk about it, we say, yeah, we need young people to run for office. That's great. And then when it actually comes into fruition, they're like, well, let's settle down here, like, you're not ready, it's not your turn. Well, what if I lose my pension? All these things. And it's very much the same with women. It's, if we're going to have more women in politics, we actually have to mean it when we say it. We can't just talk about it. We actually have to put it into action. We have to make an environment that makes feel women welcome in our party.
And I think to that comes sacrifice. I mean, there's a lot of times because males have had more opportunities over the years. When you look at an open district, the average male is going to have a stronger resume than the average female. Someone's going to take this out of context because males have had more opportunities. So they're going to have a township board position and a leadership position on this board and on that board. And the female, on average, will have a little bit less of a resume simply because she hasn't gotten those opportunities. Again, I'm sure someone will take that out of context. If you listen to the whole context there, it was a pro-women comment I was making, which is ultimately that you're going to have to look at that, because I've seen that time and again where a district opens up and you've got this male option who has a killer resume and you're like, that's amazing. And you look at the female option, you go, she has a lot of potential and a few things in the resume that I like, but nowhere near the resume of the male. This is going to happen a lot because those females haven't had those same opportunities, and it takes sacrifice. I was told I could never out this person, so I'll never be able to tell what happened, but I can talk about it in generalities, which is there was an open seat one time, not that long ago, where a Republican had the inside track, a male had the inside track, and another female wanted the position, didn't have anywhere near as strong of a resume, and the male sacrificed and said, you know what, I've always wanted this, but we do need more women in the party, so I'll step back and let them take that position. It's going to take sacrifices like that from people to say, you know what, yes, I'm ready and I've got the opportunity, but our party needs more women involved, and so I'm going to support them, but take a step back or be behind the curtain and do what I can to help them. That's not an easy thing to do, but it is a bit of what's going to be needed here.
Well, and for example, I've heard other female candidates, like when they've been out at campaign events, and people will make comments then, well, why is your husband home with the kids? Why aren't you home with your kids? Why are you making this sacrifice and not taking care of your family? So there's just a completely different mentality.
Now you sound like Susana Mendoza, because that was the same quote that she had, basically, where she said, for women, they actually have to think about what happens to the kids, whereas for a guy, what did she say? They think for 10 seconds, and then they just do it because they don't really care what happens to the family. They just say the wife's going to pick up the slack. Like, now you just sound like Mendoza. Yes, there are.
But my point is, like, why is that even a question?
There are a handful of very, very old school people on both sides of the aisle who might ask a question like that. That is not just a Republican thing, but I know a lot of Republicans, and I don't know a single one who would ask that question. So let's not pretend like that is, because that's what the Democrats try to paint us as, and let's not play into that.
No, and I think that's a good point. I think the point is, like, those types of things factor in for women. It's not the majority of the cases, but these are things that, we do have to worry about every once in a while. It's all these things that go into your mind. And I also think, and stop me if you're the one who gave me this example. When a man is asked to run for office, how many times does he have to be asked? Maybe once or twice, and he's willing to do it. Women have to be asked many, many, many times before they'll say yes. And so in an environment like this that, you know, it's our people already not running for office, like, you know,
Yeah. Well,
as a
I think
woman
that's
is
Oliver, I think that's a great point. And I want to get into some things like this. I want to have a real discussion about this. I think it's a great point into the different personality types. And here's the thing. Many people learn the hard way that nobody ever asks you to run for office. It is very, very rare for somebody to come courting you, male or female. It's rarer and rarer nowadays because nobody recruits anymore. We talk about this. It's the major problem. There are no really recruitment efforts out there. So no one's going to come ask you whether male or female. And so when you have that disparity, that males tend to have a little bit more of that ambition, a little bit more willing to step out and do things like this, whether they're asked or not, and females tend to, just personality types tend to be less willing to do that. The problem is when you don't have recruitment efforts, when you don't have organizations that focus on this, on doing the recruitment, then you're just naturally going to have this. The Democrats have not increased the number of women in office because more women just happen to pop up and decide to run. They have spent time and money and resources on doing recruitment. And this is a problem for Republicans, is that we don't recruit. In the couple months leading up to the filing deadline, we go, oh, shoot, we need a candidate in House District, blah, blah. Let's go find somebody there. But a long-term effort. Yes, there's groups like the Lincoln Series, which are amazing, but that's not a statewide, fully funded, really big effort like what the Democrats do to go find women and get them involved in politics, or like what Melinda Bush did in Lake County with Utere. Like, you have to have a huge effort, well-funded, staffed, full-time, year-round, and that's just not what Republicans do. And so part of the byproduct of that is that we are going to end up with more males than females, because males tend to be, on average, more willing to take that step without being asked to do it.
Well, here's the spin, is that the Democrats hate women, specifically Republican women, and they'll specifically target Republican women candidates and go after them. They do. There's nothing scarier. There's nothing scarier to the liberal agenda than a strong Republican woman who stands on traditional values. That's just a fact.
You took a meandering path to get there, but once you arrived at your destination, I get your point, Matt, and I think it's not an invalid one, where Democrats know that our lack of female representation is a problem for Republicans, so they will be more likely. It's a smart strategy. Be more likely to try to take out Republican women, because that puts us further behind the eight ball. So if Democrats are smart strategically, then yeah, they would go after Republican women more than Republican males on average. Not to say that if there's a Republican woman in an R20 district, they're going to spend $1 million there, because they won't. But when the opportunity presents itself, they're certainly going to jump on it.
I would just say, to kind of close it down, like, to be positive, I definitely think we've got some really like bright spots here. I mean, we've got, you know, Senator Terry Bryant, Sue Rezin, Erica Harris, Amy Ellick, Regan Deering running, Nicole Laha, you know, is going to be running up north. You know, there's some other Gabby Shanahan, yeah. I mean, there's some outstanding
and Tasia Fadike, and yes, there's a lot of great Republican women who are running this time around. So clearly, there's an effort here. Clearly, McCombie and the House and the Senate Republicans, the House Republicans are making a push here. That's for sure.
There's some good ones in there now, and we just got to expand on that. And you look at the track record that these ladies are putting up. You know, Erica Harris passing 6 bills like within her first year. I mean, it's just great. So we just need more of that.
Yeah, listen, I will say the trainings that I do around the country over the last 6 to 8 years, I've seen a marked change where women used to be there'd be a handful of women in the room. And now I can't remember the last training I went to where women weren't the majority in the room. So there are more and more Republicans or women who are involved in Republican politics. And here's the crazy thing. When you do polling and you break it down by both party and gender, it's actually Republican women who right now are uber conservative. Republican males are actually the more moderate if you're looking at the different genders. It's kind of a crazy thing. So not only are women more and more involved with Republican politics, they're more and more conservative, at least the ones that are involved with Republican politics. That said, we are still seeing a gap between getting involved in the party and being in elected positions. And that's what I'm talking about, is how do we bridge that gap? Yes, we got a lot of great candidates, and many of them are women this time around. But we first of all got to get them across the finish line, and second of all, I just looked at all the municipal recruits we had this last municipal election, and there really wasn't an effort to go get Republican women to run in these positions. So this is a function of, yes, a baby step in the right direction, but you can't deny the facts. The facts say that our female representation in elected office in this state is down.
Yeah, and I think Tony McCombie, she launched a women's leadership pack in the House, and I think we have organizations like the Lincoln Series. And as you're saying, we need to create this environment that, not only do we get these women elected, we encourage, this isn't just a, election cycle thing. this is a year-round thing that we were creating an environment where women feel welcome and want to
Yep.
participate and be involved.
Yeah, I listen, it's been a passion of mine for a long time, hiring Republican women, helping elect Republican women. The problem is there are like when we hire, we put out a job opening and we'll get 30 resumes from men and like 1 or 2 from females. And so it just makes it really hard to try to do your part to help push this along. We've got to find a way to recruit. We got to find a way to get people who are willing to get into that pipeline, to get involved, to work in politics, to run for office. Yeah, they'll volunteer. They'll get involved in a grassroots capacity. We have seen a marked increase in females in those positions, but in terms of like actually working in politics, getting elected, there's a gap there that we've struggled with, and we really need to put in that effort. And sometimes it takes sacrifice. And I'm speaking to us, to ourselves. We got to lead by example. Sometimes when there's a position that opens up, we got to be like, hey, listen, let her take it. I'll step back. Like, and I encourage our listeners to do the same thing. It's not enough to just talk about we need more women, we need more young people. I got involved in this party as a young person. I was 20-ish years old, whatever it was, when I got involved in politics officially. And I spent the first 5 or 6 years fighting my own party because I couldn't get an opportunity. People said, we want young people, so I'd get involved and then they'd push me out or treat me horribly. And I see that happening to people like DeRay and all you guys as well. DeRay's just our baby, so we talk about him having to face this a lot. It's just people talk a good game about wanting more women and more young people in the party, but you actually have to do something about it. And I'm hoping we get more discussions like this. I think this is a good discussion on our end, and I really want to encourage our watchers, our listeners, whatever we can do to help get more women involved in our party, especially in official capacities, paid staff positions, elected positions. We have to do that if we're going to be a party that actually lasts beyond a couple more years. And we'll start to see more wins, and we're going to see more balance and more influence as a result of it. All right, let's keep moving because we are just about out of time here. Let's see. Let me look at my list here and see what we maybe should close out on. Let's close out on this. National Republicans have really been succeeding in something we've talked about a lot on these podcasts lately about how Democrats are in a trick bag when it comes to Israel. And there's been several stories, several instances over the last week that I want to point to. First, a story in The Hill about how Democrats are really badly divided on Israel, and the Republican Party is actively working to deepen those divisions and push that splinter even deeper under the skin. And naturally, they've succeeded. Republicans have forced Democrats to vote on things on the floor. It helps being in the majority and being able to do that. But even pushing them to try to vote or forcing them to have to vote on resolutions, denouncing anti-Semitism around the globe, and then putting Democrats in a position where they tried to push people to vote present, but it didn't work. 95 Democrats joined Republicans in voting for it. 13 broke with the party and voted against it. A lot of examples like that. And now there's stories about a powerful pro-Israel group that's talking about spending $100 million to knock out some of these incumbents who have been siding on the Palestine / not really, but kind of Hamas side of this whole situation. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, they spent $26 million last cycle. They want to spend upwards of $100 million this cycle. This splinter is deepening. This wedge is deepening. This problem nationally for Democrats is getting worse and worse. So I think it's a great place to end our podcast on in terms of, Democrats are going to see these problems get worse and worse around the country. It's going to cause them problems nationally. It's going to cause them problems for these federal races. And maybe, just maybe, we can start to capitalize that in a state like Illinois. I'm sure Chris is going to tell me I'm crazy, but these stories don't lie. Nationally, it is working for Republicans.
So locally, let's make a push to get more Arabs to vote Republican.
This
never
is
was
Chris's
the point.
way of saying he's wrong, and he just doesn't want to say it.
Yeah, that's all right. Never was the point to get Arabs to vote Republican. That was never the point of what we talked about. But this,
I know it wasn't. It's my point. I think that's a good idea.
Wedge politics works. There's a reason why it's in Saul Alinsky's playbook. I mean, Democrats have been doing this for a long time, and we've got some great examples here of now, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, problems over the migrant crisis are driving a wedge between the Democrats' base amongst more liberal Hispanics and more traditional African Americans and older African Americans. Now we're talking about the young, progressive, more pro-Palestine part of the Democratic Party and a wedge being driven between them and older pro-Israel Democrats. I mean, there are significant problems on the Democratic side, and we hear all the time in the media about how the problems are so hard on the Republican side, so much infighting and controversy. Right now, I see way more infighting amongst Democrats than I see amongst Republicans.
You know, Republicans would have such a good election cycle. All the odds are in our favor in 2024, except for one small or maybe huge problem. It's just a bummer, but I guess it is what it is.
We talk about this all the time. Every factor last election, every factor this election is lining up where there's no reason why Republicans shouldn't be just having a complete tsunami, except for presidential politics, which keeps holding us back.
Yeah,
that's Chris's problem. Chris's fault.
Yeah, it's all my fault, Colin.
Yeah,
all my fault. Not 20 years of bad government amongst Republicans and Democrats that led to this. All my fault.
I love when Chris gets to the point where he does the back and forth head shake as he talks. It's fun. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. As I said, we have next week a special episode of a discussion where we talk about 2024. You don't want to miss that. We're going to release that as usual on Fridays, so it will be before Christmas. The week after that, we're going to have a fun, laid-back episode that I'm sure is going to be both entertaining and controversial. And then comes the new year where we get to talk about these campaigns and who's winning and who's losing and kicking some butt in 2024. So I'm excited about our upcoming episodes. I'm going to do this backwards and thank our producer, Lane Davis, first, and then thank our political team. Let's also do that backwards. So, Michael, Matt, Chris, Abby, really appreciate you guys. I'm Colin Corbett. I appreciate everybody watching and liking and subscribing and sharing. We'll get back at you in the next couple of weeks.